we are beginning a 3-week series. Our bishop has charged us with engaging in spiritual revival all across the state. And so, at present, as we're preparing to go into the Lenten season, United Methodists all over the Arkansas Conference are preparing for what our bishop is calling spiritual revival. And all he's asking us to do is go a little deeper. And so, he came up with the text that we will be focusing on these next 3 weeks. And I was going through everything and I was like, I like it. But my spirit just kept putting this Star Wars thing in my repertoire for the title of the series. And so he calls it spiritual revival. But in lieu of The Force Awakens that came out last month, and its great lineage that it stems from, I began to look a little bit closer at Star Wars as a place of theological discourse. And I realized that it's a whole lot of God wrapped up in this movie and in the movies that have come out through the years. And so got to playing with it and doing some discernment and came up with the series that we will begin today. And we're simply talking about God's love. God's love. And so the subtext to that is may the force be with you. This week, it's unconditionally. We talk about God's unconditional love. So the text has already been read for your hearing, so I just ask that we go ahead and pray together as we prepare to break open the word today. Gracious God, we thank you so much just for being who you are. But God, we especially thank you for your love and for your grace and for the power that comes with your presence and your spirit. So now, God, as we listen to the word that comes from you, speak clearly to us, God, where we are in our lives. A word useful for our spirit, for our empowerment, for us growing closer to your will and your way. We thank you in advance and consider these things done. Amen. So about Star Wars, it's considered an American epic space opera franchise. And it's a series that was created by a gentleman named George Lucas, and the very first one came out in 1977. And when it begins, you have this long scroll on the screen that gives you this backstory about this land, this galaxy that's far, far away, and everything that's happening there. And so the original movie was just called Star Wars, but they renamed it later on so that it would fit into the series. And so now it's considered episode 4, A New Hope. And there are several others that came after that were also successful, like The Empire Strikes Back, The Return of the Jedi, and that was the first trilogy. Then you had another trilogy that began in like 2000, well, the late 90s going into the 2000s. And so presently we have like 8 movies that are all Star Wars. And so the one that we'll be talking about today is the very first one. Because all of these movies go together to tell a complete story, but they all stem from this very first one. And it opens with a rebel ship being boarded by this tyrant that we call Darth Vader. And this plot basically follows a young farm boy named Luke Skywalker, and he ends up meeting a host of people who end up helping him learn about who he is, and also ends up helping him walk into this power that he has that he never knew that he had. And all of this comes from the need to rescue Princess Leia. And so I was looking at the storyline, and in that story there's so much more than just a storyline. What I see is a mirror that explains the plight of each of our struggles. So when you look at Luke, he's a young boy who's living his life and he's never thought about really where he is or what he wants to do, except that he wants to go to this academy, and he really wants to go. Doesn't really know why, it's such a great desire within him, but his uncle and his aunt know. His father wanted to go to the academy and apparently was very good there. And so they attributed to him having some of his father within him. But Luke is at a place where he must discern the ways of the Force. And he has a choice to make, and he doesn't really have a lot of time to make it. So he's stuck between honoring the nature of his Father that lives in him, or honoring the teachings of his uncle and aunt, which is basically encouraging him to stay on this farm for some more time until they think he's a little bit more ready to go to this academy. Now, his father was a Jedi Master. And what the Jedi Masters were skilled people in protecting the peace and justice of the Republic. And so they had a very, very important job. And even though Luke has this desire to go to the academy, and he didn't know his father, never met him, this desire is so strong in him. And I began to think about us as people, how a lot of times we have that dream or that vision or that hunger to accomplish something, but for whatever reason we will not honor it and may even forsake it, all in the name of staying on the farm or doing just a little bit more work or needing to earn that extra money. There's some barrier that's usually there that simply by our own choice and will can be removed. But the question is, do we take the normal road, which is the road to, go to work, do what you need to do, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, this is the safe and the way that we know? Or do we do like Luke and take the road less traveled? You see, Luke Skywalker, that is exactly who we're talking about. He has a unique opportunity, and it happens when the Jawas, they're like these child-sized scavengers, sell his uncle these droids. And one of them is R2-D2. And he has this vision, or not a vision, but more like a message from the princess that he is trying to get to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, Obi-Wan is considered the last hope to be able to save the princess and her homeland. And he's really important. But Luke here is the middleman. And he has to find Obi-Wan, who he actually thought was dead. And he finds out that he's not dead at all. He's actually been around for quite a long time, and nobody's known where he is. But when I look at the way that Obi-Wan was looked towards in that movie, it reminded me a lot of Jesus. Obi-Wan is the one that people look to have this righteous answer, to be able to know what to do when we're in trouble, to be able to know how to be able to fight against the Empire. Obi-Wan is the one who's giving this empowerment. And so when he and Luke actually meet, he begins to tell Luke about the Force. The Force is with you. The Force is always righteous. It has a purpose. It is very powerful. And that's what he's doing. He's being a guide. Because he's mastered engaging this Force. And it's revealed everywhere that Obi-Wan goes. And I think also about Jesus. Everywhere that Jesus went, he's revealing in his actions his relationship with God the Father. And then when Jesus talks in the parables, a lot of times people came to him because of what they saw and what they heard and what they witnessed. But he's always pointing back to the Father. I'm here doing this because it's my Father's will. Only if my Father would allow it to be done. Even when he wanted to come off the cross and not be put there at all, well, I would not be here if it was possible, but it is my Father's will. And so you have this similarity that we see here in this movie between Christ's revelations leading people back to God and Obi-Wan leading people back to the Force. Now, the more we learn about the Force and engage this Force, the better we're prepared to learn to walk in it. The more that we're empowered to be what Paul is actually talking about in the text. More than conquerors. You see, I would consider the Force something like the Spirit. And when they define the Force, they define it very specifically. And it's considered to be something that's greater than us as people. I believe it to be exactly that. It's the one thing that is described as surrounding us, penetrating us, binding us to the universe. In Star Wars, they say that energy is created by all people. But I believe that more than it being created by all people, it already exists within us. It's just a matter of us acknowledging that it's there and accepting it. because it's not going to go away. The force of God's love, of God's power, of God's presence, and our relationship to that is what enables us to be able to walk in God's will and God's way, to be able to withstand the wiles of evil. Paul says the wiles of the devil, but we'll call it the wiles of evil. The powers and the principalities that will us to be away from God. God's presence wills us back into that loving relationship. And so it's looking at that and knowing that and being confident of God's love and God's presence that empowers us. When Luke finally began to learn about the force, he told him, let go of your conscious self and feel the force. Don't trust your eyes because they can deceive you, but stretch out yourself with your feelings. And as Luke began to listen, he began to become more successful. This is specifically when he was learning how to use that lightsaber. And just a small confession. We put the lightsaber on the front of the bulletin, and I didn't pay attention to which lightsaber it was. Unfortunately, it's the dark side saber that's on the front of the program. But please don't be alarmed. We're not going to the dark side. But next week it'll be in order. But as he's learning how to use his lightsaber, the more that he's able to feel the presence of the force, the more successful that he is. And I'm convinced that the more that we find ways to engage God's love and God's presence, and to be there and to be still and to feel the value of how it's different from everything else that we experience, the more that we too are empowered. I think of the Jedi Masters and how their entire purpose was to protect the peace and the justice. And for me, you would think that peace and justice go hand in hand, but they were empowered to be able to fight. And a lot of times, that means that in order to have peace and justice, it also means that we must fight against evil and oppression and the things that are not of God. It means that the things that we know are available to us are still available to us. But it means that there are requirements on our part and work that we have to do as well. But it's easier to do that work when we have a full and strong and an affectionate persuasion because we've experienced the divine love of God for ourselves. You see, that's the certainty that Paul is talking about in the text when he says neither death nor life, neither the terrors, neither the beauty, there's nothing in the world, neither the powers or the principalities. He's certain by all means of his being that there is nothing that will keep him from God. And that empowers him in a different way to be able to engage the work that's before him. You see, when we're confident in something or in someone, we approach it with a different attitude, with a different vigor, and with a different enthusiasm than we would if we don't believe in it, if we don't know it to be true for ourselves, or if we're still trying to figure it out, if we're still pondering. But when we get to a place that we feel that we know, then we begin to move with life. And that life is what other people begin to see that makes them wonder, what is it that makes you so happy or so enthusiastic or so excited about life? And a lot of times that's not contingent upon your situation, but simply upon your outlook. Because we'll all have bad days, we'll all have things to endure, we will all have things in our lives that seem unfavorable. And the crazy thing is, no matter who we meet, everybody is going through something that seems like a mountain at the time. No matter what it is, it may be bills, maybe kids acting up, may just be a walk up on the wrong side of the bed. But this is all the more reason that we should engage each other with love and with grace and with the kindness that God has already imparted upon us and into us, that's ours to share with all that we meet. You see, the one thing that I found interesting was Hans and Luke both had some type of affinity for the princess. And Luke is like, let's save her. And Hans is like, what's in it for me? I don't know that I want to save her. She's the princess. princess. She ought to have a lot of money. She ought to be able to do something for me. And when he thinks he's not getting paid, he really doesn't want to go save her. But Luke is like, we're going to go save her anyway. And as they go, they end up being successful at it. But once the mission is over, Hans wants to take his money and leave, and Luke says there's more work for us to do. And so as we look at the lives that we lead, our motivation should be in connection to the God that we know and that we love and that we are in relationship with. And in that relationship, in our honoring of our responsibility to the work that's necessary to do.